Back in August, I published a video called Western Bears Confirmed as NRL's 18th team. Everything in that video was true at the time, and very high profile outlets were reporting it as a done deal. And as somebody who wants Perth as the next team in the NRL, I was super excited about it. But that was 4 months ago. 4 months that have been packed with ups, downs, confusion, and speculation as to what's actually going on with the NRL's expansion. So today I thought I'd sit down and set the record straight about what's actually going on with teams 18, 19, and 20 in the NRL, and how soon we can expect to actually see them take part in the competition. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. The NRL want to expand their competition to 20 teams. There's something that's been spoken about within NRL headquarters and even publicly by Australian Rugby League Commission Chairman Peter V'landys. It's a goal that they're financially set up for since a while back. The major thing V'landys and NRL CEO Andrew Abdo did in response to the COVID pandemic was cut costs. And they did that super effectively. That, paired with generally increased interest in the competition, as well as significantly higher crowds, has resulted in the NRL having a reported $420 weed number $1 million fund set aside purely for expanding the competition. Before any expansion can be announced though, the NRL's organisational rules state that the 17 existing clubs have to vote on whether or not to allow a new team to enter the competition. And there's a number of valid reasons why existing clubs might not be in favour of introducing new teams. For example, if the total broadcast revenue only goes up by a little, then it might actually mean that everyone's slice of that revenue actually gets smaller. Not to mention that a new team would require players, coaches, experienced board members, so it increases competition in all those areas as well. If you're a club who struggles to attract talent already, why would you want another team competing with you for that talent? That's why there are such strict criteria that any potential bid to enter the NRL has to meet. Any new team essentially has to convince the 17 existing clubs that they'll be able to generate enough revenue by themselves so as not to impact the revenue that the other teams receive. And that they'll be able to have a solid long-term junior base so as to be able to contribute to the overall player pool of the NRL. After all, when you consider a top 30 squad plus 5 development players, introducing 3 new teams to the NRL is 105 new players, and those players have to come from somewhere. And that brings me on to the bids themselves. Now, the PNG bid is locked in. It's all done, and according to the Daily Telegraph, we can expect a formal announcement on that before Christmas. The massive drawcard for that has obviously been the $60 million per year commitment from the Australian government to essentially fund the team. Good to know our tax dollars are going to be spent on Blake Laurie living in a compound in Port Moresby. What matters though is whether the existing clubs are behind it, and that's a little more in doubt. Speaking on James Graham's Buy Round podcast, Sea Eagles CEO Tony Mestrov spoke quite honestly about his concerns that once that 10-year agreement with the government is over, he doesn't feel that PNG can run the club on their own, citing his concerns with corruption within the country. Now, whether you agree with that or not isn't really relevant. What's important is that that's the opinion of one of the 17 CEOs in the NRL, one of the guys who'll be voting on whether to allow them in. That kind of skepticism is not a good look for a new franchise. I've made my opinions clear on the PNG bid before, but to cover it briefly, 1, I don't know why we're putting an expansion team in the only place on earth where rugby league has already fully captured the market. 2, I'm worried it could be a bit of a bad look for the NRL when future governments campaign on the fact that the current government spent $600 million of taxpayer money on an NRL team in a foreign country. And 3, I just don't see how they're going to attract enough talent to be competitive. Now, in fairness, the NRL have successfully negotiated an agreement with the PNG government to provide tax incentives for players who go over and play for the PNG team. But living in a gated compound there, having to fly out and back in for away games in the tropical heat of Papua New Guinea does still make me a bit concerned. Dragons coach Shane Flanagan strongly believes that the PNG national team players alone would be able to win a handful of NRL games, even without talent from elsewhere. But to me, I don't see the point of introducing a team whose ceiling is winning a handful of games. But it is happening, and I always promised myself that I would 100% get behind it if it were ever confirmed. Papua New Guinea and rugby league fans are the best in the world. We're going to see some awesome scenes coming out of this team. And this is a bid that has an appeal beyond just the NRL. Speaking on Channel 9's 100% Footy, Peter V'landys said, "Kids don't normally go to school in Papua New Guinea, and that's the beginning of the cycle of poverty. But once you take a rugby league player to a school, they all turn up. The NRL, in establishing pathways in Papua New Guinea, are betting on the country's development, essentially saying that if they get in at the bottom now and help it grow, they'll be able to benefit from that in the future. That's the thinking behind it, and that's why they'll greenlight it sooner rather than later. Most likely though as the 19th team, because there is still one name that the NRL are holding out some serious hope for. You guessed it, the Western Bears. It's been a bit of a roller coaster for them since everyone was reporting that the Bears were back. And apparently that whole roller coaster unfolded because of one licensing fee. See, the original Western Bears bid was made up of the North Sydney Bears, the Western Australian government, and Cash Converters Deputy Chairman Peter Cummins. Cummins was the one bankrolling the whole thing, and yeah, 4 months ago everything looked good to go. But in the application form to submit a bid to enter the NRL, there's a section that asks how much you'd be willing to pay in a licensing fee. That's a fee that would have gone straight to the NRL and likely been distributed among the existing clubs to offset any revenue loss they would receive. When the Western Bears reached that section, they indicated that Peter Cummins wasn't willing to pay a licensing fee, and it all kicked off from there. The result of that was the bid being rejected completely, and it did look like that was that. But then back in October, the Australian Rugby League Commission approached the WA government directly. They had the support of the North Sydney Bears, and they said that they wanted to run the expansion team themselves. The idea was that the NRL would provide the funding that was originally going to be sourced from Peter Cummins, and therefore own the team. Then sometime down the line, when the franchise was able to support itself, the NRL would sell it on to private investors. And actually, that's a model that sports organizations across the world have quite often implemented with expansion teams. And it looks like that structure is the way it's going to play out, with the negotiations progressing day by day. The NRL's ultimate aim is to be able to announce the Perth team at the same time as PNG, with Perth entering in 2027 and PNG in 2028. But that's only just over 2 years away, so time is running out. And then comes the concept of the 20th team, which is absolutely on the radar, but it hasn't been put into motion yet. The preferred idea is reportedly to put a team in the South Island of New Zealand, where the Southern Orcas and the South Island Kia have expressed a desire to enter the NRL, particularly in the wake of a new 30,000-seater stadium scheduled to open in Christchurch in 2026. That's a bid I'm a big fan of. The rivalry between the North and the South Island is something that I think could be tapped into by the NRL. The Warriors are miraculously right now making a dent in that historically invincible rugby union dominance in New Zealand, and that's not a chance that I want to let slip by. Not to mention that the junior base we could gain by converting more union juniors into league juniors is massive. We have a heap of Kiwis in the NRL, but very few from the South Island, so it could prove a very effective growth area. The other option is Central Queensland, which could be a really good area to get talent from, but I don't think we need to put a whole team there in order to access those pathways. I think greater focus on those areas from the existing Queensland clubs would be a better way of doing that. That being said, it's an idea that's got a reasonable amount of support around the league from greater minds than me, but as I say, it's not the one that I would pick. So essentially, we are going to have 20 teams in the NRL, and even conservatively, it looks like we're going to hit that mark in the next 10 years. The Papua New Guinea bid will be announced imminently, with Perth still a bit of a developing story. But I do have confidence that the Western Bears will get across the line, particularly given how strong their bid was said to be back in August. So what do you think of the latest expansion news? Which 3 teams would you like to see added to the NRL? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.